What's up, YouTube? I am the Vanilla Nerd, and today I want to review Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. Now, my wife and I are going through a Star Trek phase, and we just finished Star Trek IV: The Journey Home, which I will be doing a review of shortly, but I wanted to get this one out first because, chronologicalness. I know I don't always follow chronology, but that's what we're going to do now, so for Star Trek at least. And so we're going to do that one, and then eventually I'm going to watch Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. No, I have no plans of doing a review for Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, nor Star Trek I, The Motion Picture, anytime soon. I'm not ruling out entirely, but I really don't like those movies, so it's not on my future radar. But anywho, as always, obligatory spoiler warning. I will be spoiling all of Star Trek 3, so if you don't like spoilers, get out right now. But again, the movie is almost 40 years old, if not greater than 40 years old. So yeah, you've been warned. So, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. I guess the first thing I want to start with is talking about the plot. Now, I am okay with the plot of this movie, but it is rather simplistic. It's basically just we need to go save Spock, which means that we need to break Starfleet orders. And oh yeah, Klingons are involved. It's pretty boring, and it follows, it doesn't really get much more complicated than that. They go to the place where Spock's body is, they fight off a ship more or less successfully, and then they get Spock back to Vulcan. And I guess there's supposed to be this constant sense of dread of, can they successfully save Spock? You know, he's put in danger quite often, and it's like they kind of sacrifice so much to get Spock to Vulcan and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, were they ever not going to succeed? I never in my mind's eye did I think, oh, they're going to fail, And maybe there's, I don't know if this is like the best criticism, because I know there are some movies where I know they're going to succeed, but I still like them. And I don't know what's different about this movie, but I never really felt the tension. I always was just like, okay, Spock's gonna survive and stuff, at least on my most recent viewing. Maybe that's my most recent viewing. I do remember as a kid having it be a little bit more intense, but yeah. Now, moving on to some highlights, what I did like about the plot is I loved the crew stealing the Enterprise. That was just a really fun scene, seeing them kind of beat up some Federation guards, break McCoy out of prison, and get on board the Enterprise. I loved, the Excelsior chasing after them, but then failing epically to chase after them because Scott sabotaged the Excelsior. Fantastic, hilarious. And then leading into that, when they get to Genesis and they see the Klingon bird of prey, they're smart, they try and battle it, but ultimately, the Enterprise is not crewed at this point in time, and it is barely functioning. It still has the battle damage from Wrath of Khan, and so, I think it makes sense that this smaller ship with less weapons is able to, take down the Enterprise, and that's fantastic. What is less fantastic, and actually something that my dad pointed out to me, is the fact that it makes no sense that the Klingons think that 6 of their officers could capture the crew of the Enterprise. I get that they think that they realize the Enterprise is dead in the water, but they have no reason to believe that there's not a full complement of people on board that ship. And if that's true, that's over 400 people that 6 guys have to keep prisoner if they're seriously intending on beaming aboard and taking the ship for themselves. It makes absolutely no sense that they think that 6 guys could hold down this entire ship. I get that the Klingon commander is smart. He uses his intuition. He's like, oh, I can tell something's off about this. They aren't playing this the way that they should be. So my intuition tells me they're dead in the water, and I'm in the superior ship right now. I get it. That's totally fine and valid, but it doesn't make any sense that he thinks I can hold a crew of 400 with my 6 guys. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, all that being said, what I do appreciate about the Klingons' ineptitude is it gives Kirk this nice moment to outsmart them. He beams down to the planet's surface as they beam into the Enterprise after he set the self-destruct. It was smart, it was fun, and it's just like what Bones said. You did what you had to do, what you always do, turn death into a fighting chance to live. And I love that. It exemplifies Kirk. Fantastic. So yeah, I really loved every scene in this movie that had the Enterprise being a part of it. I loved seeing the crew steal the Enterprise. I loved seeing the Enterprise get into this skirmish with a bird of prey. And at the end, you had the destruction of the Enterprise, which On that note, I really want to highlight the destruction of the Enterprise and the special effects that went into it because that was really, really cool. I loved seeing the nameplate of the NCC 1701 of the Enterprise and seeing it burn up as it preps to explode, and then you see the dish just completely explode, and then you see the ravaged, almost completely destroyed Enterprise streak across the sky as it burns up in the atmosphere of Genesis. Fantastic. So, so good. It is kind of funny, though, because previously in the battle, when the Enterprise fired on the bird of prey, they just managed to have some special effects lightning hit it and no real battle damage. It's kind of funny because in Wrath of Khan, they actually showed battle damage on both ships and did a really good job with that. But then in this movie, I guess they just either didn't have the budget or they didn't want to damage their bird of prey ship, knowing that it was going to be used in the next movie or something. I don't know. But what I do know is that while the special effects on Enterprise's destruction were fantastic, the special effects of Target of the little space battle weren't as cool. They still were good and were convincing, and I liked them, but they just weren't as good. So, small critique, but I want to bring it up anyway. Moving on, let's talk about the plot point / setting of Genesis. And that planet was cool. It was beautiful, it was lush, it was nice. And I liked how they showed the different biomes jutting up against each other and stuff. And the instability of the planet was very fascinating and very interesting. I really did not like the explanation for the instability, where they came up with this fake excuse of proto-matter. And then Savick gives this really boring exposition dump of it's an unethical substance and yada, yada, yada. And it makes David look bad. And I don't mind David looking bad, but I thought it was a really weak and lame excuse for this planet being unfit. I think what makes 10 times more sense is because Genesis was detonated inside of a nebula rather than on a planet, it didn't have all the raw materials it needed to be a fully successful and functioning planet. And that would be an wonderful explanation as to why it doesn't work the right way. David could be like, yeah, we always planned for it to go on a planet, but this was detonated inside a nebula. It had a lot of raw materials and gases and stuff, but not everything it needed to survive. And that would have made a lot more sense, but unfortunately they didn't go with that. I also, side note, really think it's quite dumb that they, Savick and them thought it was interesting that there was animal life on this planet because the original Genesis, there wasn't supposed to be animal life. And that boggles my mind because how is a planet supposed to function without animal life? How are the plants supposed to carry on without animals? There is so much interconnectivity between plants and animals that if you built a planet without animal life, I do not see how it could survive. Sure, the planet might not need sentient animal life, but it needs animal life. And I do not understand why they didn't do that. Why they think that makes sense. And so, yeah. But you know what? Whatevs. They found Spock. They were able to help him. And then there was the creepy microbes of the torpedo that grew into creepy slugs for no reason. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. Moving on, let's talk about character, and there's not much here. There is some. I really like the character moment where the crew of the Enterprise show that they're willing to do anything to save Spock. There's the whole heist that goes, and that's successful. But also, Kirk gives them that out. He's like, hey, I've already asked too much of you, but you don't need to move on any further. And then they're all like, no, we're willing to stay here. And he's like, okay, great. And so that's really fun. I also like McCoy sharing the mind with Spock. There were some very humorous moments, seeing these two that are complete opposites, have to inhabit the same body. Hilarious and quite funny. I think there's more humor that could have been gotten out of that, but it did provide a few funny moments, so there's that. Now, outside of those two things, there's of course Kirk. And Kirk is a fantastic character. I mean, he is the main character of this movie, so yeah. Obviously, he should be doing a good job. And I think he does do a pretty good job. I like him. And I really like the scene where he gets sad and torn up over the death of his son. I mean, of course, I don't like it. I wish he could have been happy. But I think it's a powerful scene. I think William Shatner does a really good job showing off the absolute anguish of losing your son and stuff. And so fantastic. And it still makes me feel sad for Kirk to this day. So, good on you. But in relation to that, I've always found it funny because later on in the movie, Kirk and Commander Crew get into this fist fight, And then Krug, the little Klingon commander, is hanging off the cliff, and Kirk offers to save him. He's like, "Here, give me your hand." And it makes no sense. It's like, dude, you just cursed this guy out. He killed your son. You hate him, and yet you want to save him? Like, look, you kill him and you succeed. Like, you don't need, like, you can get onto the bird of prey and you're okay. But no, he's over here being like, let me save you, because that's what the good guy would do. But I think it would have been 10 times better had he just kicked him off the cliff to begin with and been like, yeah, I hate you. So much better, but it is what it is, and here we are. In conclusion, I actually found myself liking Star Trek 3 a lot more on this time around than I did the last time, It was a fun movie. It had a good little space battle, it had some fun action, and it had one or two good character moments. But it really just didn't have that much to offer. It was a movie that I feel like is very lacking. Pretty simple plot. We need to save Spock, and that's exactly what they do. There's not much else to it. It's fine. I don't hate the movie, but it's never going to be anything special because it's just never really stood out. So, decent movie. Would recommend to a friend. Definitely helps keep the continuity between the last movie, Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, and the next movie, Star Trek 4, The Journey Home. But otherwise, there's not much.